This is Rudy,
This is Flick.
and we are at episode 5 on the Left of the Dial podcast. We have a very busy week this week. We're going to kick off talking a little bit about Ginger Baker, and then we're going to jump into archival replacements material, the replacements album, Dead Man's Pop.
And we're also going to be talking about some of our favorite fall songs.
And then we're going to close off this week, keeping it Midwest, and we're going to have a banality draft for John Cougar Mellencamp and all variations of the spelling of his name. We're going to get to 10. You're coming with us. Let's start a little bit by talking about Ginger Baker. I know you're a Cream fan. I am a Cream fan. But for me, just being a little left field here, my big exposure, the thing that I love Ginger Baker for, is he played on the Public Image Limited, what's called the generic album. If you bought the album, it just said album on it. If you bought the tape or cassette, it just said cassette. It was the generic Public Image Limited album, produced by Bill Laswell with this incredible all-star band where the drummers alternately were Tony Williams and Ginger Baker. Bill Laswell plays bass. Ryuichi Sakimoto does the keyboards, and the Steve Vai from Frank Zappa's band does the guitar. And Ginger Baker's drum work on this album is so good. And that band was so tight. It was just a one-off studio creation by Bill Laswell. And for some reason, Johnny Rotten's voice sounds amazing with it. But the band was so good that they got back together and recorded the Ginger Baker solo album, Middle Passage, or it's not the entire band, and there's other people on the album, but basically that Public Image Limited generic sound that Bill Laswell got in part with Ginger Baker was really, really compelling in the sort of punk idiom of John Lydon, but it also, there was a flavor of it that really brought out he was like an omnivore for drumming. He did rock, he did jazz, he did a lot of really heavily African influenced stuff, which rock and jazz obviously both are. So, I was really blown away by the Public Image Limited record. The last song on the album not only has what I think is one of Steve Vai's greatest guitar solos, it's just 2 minutes of whammy bar magic. It also has, I think, one of Ginger Baker's greatest performances. The last song on the generic album, it's called Ease. Definitely look that one up. And then if you like anything on that generic album, find Ginger Baker's Middle Passage solo record. That's my I know he did a ton of other stuff, and I'd love to talk about his other stuff, but I just had to get that out there because I'm not sure people realize that stuff's out there, and it's fucking great.
Yeah, and so yeah, there was a big period of my life, and this is the period that led me to start playing guitar, actually, where Jimi Hendrix and Cream were just huge for me, and Ginger Baker. And we should say, Ginger Baker passed away at the age of 80. What, Sunday? Was it?
The 5th, I think, yeah.
Yeah. Lived to 80 years old, basically surviving on vitriol, I think.
He smoked his entire life.
Yeah, he was... and he was not a pleasant person. I mean, we shouldn't candy coat that. He was not a pleasant guy, and an interesting instance of that. And this shows you, I think, more than anything, how good of a drummer he was. So Jack Bruce, who was the bass player for Cream, first Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce first knew each other from a musical outfit called the Graham Bond organization, I think, in London. And at one point, Ginger Baker was angry with Jack Bruce and attacked him with a knife. And I think when you're a good drummer when that doesn't lead somebody to never want to talk to you or deal with you ever again, but instead they started a band together later on, and that band was Cream.
Yeah, from what I understand, Ginger Baker basically had to shoehorn himself into Blind Faith because Eric Clapton sort of had had enough maybe of him as a bandmate and wasn't super enthused about the harsh side. But he ends up in the band. They end up making that record. So again, the drum the ability wins.
Yeah, he was a tremendous drummer, and jazz was really what he really was a jazz drummer. Um, Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce were both more jazz than anything else, and then Eric Clapton was more blues than anything else, and that's really, I think, the recipe for what Cream was. Um,
There are those who would say he is responsible for the drum solo craze of the like late '60s, early '70s.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
I would say that that's accurate.
that's a mixed blessing, shall we say, at best.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not necessarily the legacy you want to be known for, but he was an uncommon drummer, so he could maybe sustain that more than I'm not gonna act like drum solos are my favorite thing in the world, but certain
Toad
drummers.
is great, though. Come on, Toad is great.
Yeah. Well, I can't really hang for all of that, but I mean, what
It
are we
isn't great.
what are we talking about? 26 minutes or so? I can't hang for
Well,
26 minutes.
first of all, it's the studio version. I think is actually a little better than the live one that came out on. It's not on Disraeli Gears. It's on
Wheels of Fire.
Wheels of Fire.
I
Yeah,
think Wheels of Fire.
yeah. The studio version. I mean, it's a waltz from hell. It's pretty. It's pretty great. I don't take hard enough drugs often enough to probably experience and enjoy all of it, but I went back and listened to it this week, and that studio version that's pretty insane shit. That's pretty great. It's pretty
Yeah.
great.
And yeah, a few years ago there was, and maybe it's still on Netflix now, but a few years ago I remember watching a documentary about Ginger Baker. I think it was called Beware of Mr. Baker.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point in the documentary, he beats the filmmaker with a cane. He just takes his cane and I don't know, maybe this isn't as funny as but it kind of is.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
he takes a cane to the face, got him right in the nose with his cane.
I mean, how good do you have to be for people to tolerate you, even when you're a complete asshole? You have to be Ginger Baker good.
Yeah.
That's it. And I don't think he cared how people remembered him as a person, but I think the esteem that people have for his drumming, he was a drummer's drummer too. Like drummers loved him,
Oh yeah.
and so he can't fade the quality of the music,
Hmm.
and the playing cannot do that. Well, R.I.P. To Mr. Baker. I definitely want to see that documentary because I think Johnny Rotten is in it. If I may,
Yes.
I'm going to throw this in for right around the time Johnny Rotten recorded with Ginger Baker for this Public Image Limited album. Bill Laswell was working on another record that's a little on the obscure side. It's still in print. You can still get it pretty easily, and it's on Spotify. The band was called the Golden Palominos. It has three great Michael Stipe, like great lost 80s Michael Stipe performances. The first three songs, two are Michael Stipe lyrical originals, and then the third is a cover of Moby Grape's Omaha. Fantastic. Jack Bruce plays on that album, and Johnny Rotten sings on that album too. So Johnny Rotten worked with Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker twice within a year after making his entire career on how much classic rock sucks. Very strange. But look up Golden Palominos if you can. Try to find the album is called Visions of Excess. And the first side is fantastic. Three Michael Stipe songs followed by a Johnny Rotten song with Jack Bruce in as part of the band. Little on the obscure side, but worth digging up.
Okay, and now we're going to talk about a recent reissue of sorts for the Replacements called Dead Man's Pop. What it is a deluxe version of the sessions from the album that became Don't Tell a Soul. What is not included is actually "Don't Tell a Soul." The songs are here, but it's not the original mixes. What is included is Matt Wallace, who produced the album. We have his alternate mixes, and then we have the Bearsville sessions, the sessions that were scrapped. A few interesting stories that we'll go into later about those sessions, and then live songs from a University of Wisconsin Milwaukee performance.
Where would you say, I mean, you're the Replacements, you have all of the creds on the Replacements front on this podcast. So where in the pantheon do you put Don't Tell a Soul?
Well, "Don't Tell a Soul" it's definitely on the back end. It is better than Stink, I think. Stink was kind of one great song and then a bunch of throwaways as an EP that was done between their first and third album. Well, first and second album, depending on if you're talking full length or EP or whatever, however you consider that. And definitely, "Don't Tell a Soul" is also better than "All Shook Down," but it really can't touch the stretch of, I think, Hootenanny through "Pleased to Meet Me." It doesn't really touch those.
And who was in the band by the time Don't Tell a Soul session started?
Well, there wasn't a whole lot of personnel changes with the Replacements. It was really Bob Stinson was out prior to "Pleased to Meet Me." They replaced him, I think, before replaced. It's a pun.
Hey, hey.
I think I somewhere prior to "Don't Tell a Soul" they replaced him with Slim Dunlap, but he was never a part of the "Pleased to Meet Me" sessions. That was just basically a three-piece band for those. And so really it is the original three. It's Paul Westerberg, Tommy Stinson, Chris Mars, and then Slim Dunlap on guitar.
Do you think Slim is a? I don't. I mean, I don't think Slim Dunlap's a particularly heavy hand on the record. Am I? I mean, am I missing something?
No, he's not. And well, so an interesting story about replacing Bob Stinson. I think the record company really wanted them to go with Charlie Sexton, and that was a possibility, but I don't know how much of a possibility that was really ever going to be. And Slim Dunlap was actually a guy who I think worked with Bob Stinson, was a coworker at one of his many jobs, and it might have been. I want to say it could have been as a janitor too. But anyway, in Minneapolis at that time, it's just like everybody that did music knew each other, and I don't remember the story now of how Slim Dunlap ended up being picked. But I'm certain more than anything else, it had to do with whether or not he could hang with them parting wise. It's kind of like Mick Taylor. Mick Taylor never really made it as Rolling Stone because he couldn't really hang with the partying.
Yeah,
and it was much that way with the Mats.
interesting. Well, I am nowhere near the Replacements fan that you are. To me, I bought Tim when it came out. And I mean, Bastards Young. Someday we need to do a show about the greatest yells in recorded rock, and I'm going to put Bastards of Young. Actually, including on Dead Man's Pop, I actually thought on that live set in Wisconsin, I thought the Bastards of Young yell was way more invested in than I thought that he would be doing by that point. He was still given a pretty mighty shout there, even at that point. That's 2 albums old. But anywho, neither here nor there. It's a good it's a good live set. I remember I remember Pleased to Meet Me and Liking That a lot. I loved that Alex Chilton, that double 7-inch EP. That was around Iowa City. I was able to get that real cheap, like $3. That was great. And then I remember Don't Tell a Soul feeling like that was their like breakthrough record, or it was positioned sort of as the
Yeah, positioned
the
is
record where
the
they're
right
going to cash
terminology.
in. Yeah, I don't think but I will say that I do hear that a little bit. Like, "I'll Be You" is a great pop song, and you can't say that it's out of form for them to write great pop songs. They always have.
No.
But there was something about that was it was it definitely felt more of an effort for a wider audience. I definitely feel like that song in particular was like a great radio single for them, and it was among their better radio singles. And I just feel like it was written to be that. Am I crazy? Or
Well,
was "Don't Tell a Soul" marketed that way?
yeah, yeah. Don't Tell a Soul had a much bigger push from the record label. Um, as far as the songs go, uh, so Paul Westerberg had always written songs that were rockers, and then songs that were, uh, ballads, but also more introspective, more sympathetic, maybe. The songs, a song like "Aching to Be." "Aching to
Mm-hmm.
Be" was not something that came out of nowhere on "Don't Tell a Soul." It's very much the type of song that Paul Westerberg was writing all along.
Yep.
Was always very uh, timid about trying to get the band to play them. For one thing, when Bob Stinson was in the band, he wouldn't have played it. There were, I think even a song like "I Will Dare" was maybe a song that Bob Stinson was not one to warm up to. So he knew he had at least one tough critic in the band, as far as that goes, and he had these songs that he didn't necessarily think that the band would go for, but he was always writing them. I think, eventually, people got that out of him more and more, and anyway, there are some songs that I think are maybe a little bit out of character, but they're not necessarily the songs that people know. Like "Aching to Be," I don't think is really out of character. It's just something that was rising to the surface over the years.
Hmm.
And you know, I maybe so basically my synopsis of this, of "Don't Tell Us," going back to "Don't Tell a Soul" as it was originally released. I always thought it was like half good, half you have songs I like, as good as anything else that they had ever done, and then half songs I just didn't want anything to do with. Like "We'll Inherit the Earth," I have no time for that song. Any
Hmm.
mix of it, I just don't care about it. I I really don't like "Asking Me Lies." There are songs on this album that just grate on me, and the mix didn't help that. I will say the Matt Wallace alternate mix did improve on almost all of the songs, but it didn't necessarily make me like any songs that I hadn't previously liked. And it didn't change my opinion of the songs themselves, but it does allow the songs to breathe a little bit more. It really takes the gloss off of it and the polish off of it. It's the unpolishing of the turds, maybe. Uh, it really, I think for a lot of Replacement fans, there are a lot of them that just didn't want to have anything to do with this album, and I think maybe they're hearing it with new ears because the mix as it is here does make it sound more familiar. It is you hear that it is the Replacements now. It doesn't sound so because it sounded like the mix as it was originally done does make it sound like they're trying to take away the rough edges from a band that lived on rough edges. That is their identity. That's who they are. Uh, the Bearsville sessions really show that, because that was a really I don't know if we want to go into that yet. I don't know if you have more thoughts on the Matt Wallace mix at all.
I'm again. I feel it's disingenuous for me to pretend that I like know every nuance of the difference. I do think the Dead Man's Pop version deadens them a little bit. I do think I think I might like the original mix more than you do, but I have to go back to the point about Asking Me Lies. To me, that is them stretching out a little bit, right? Like it's not totally alien, I guess. Like even like Within Your Reach sort of sticks out on Hootenanny. It's a bit of an anomalous thing, and I think of stuff like Asking Me Lies is not too far from that. They're stretching out and doing something a little different. It may not have been a total success, but
yeah, I mean maybe, but yeah, exactly. It's just maybe that I don't consider it a success. But to the point that I was talking about earlier about Westerberg writing these songs, Within Your Reach is a good example because the reason why that is recorded with a drum machine. And the rest of the mats aren't really there for that, and I think it was, if I remember the story right, I think it was just basically he did that after everybody else had gone home, because he didn't think that anybody else would really like that song, but probably Peter Jesperson, I imagine their manager at the time, I imagine he really wanted him to get that song recorded. And so he just basically did it without the rest of the band.
I love In Your Reach. I think that's one of their that's a should have been huge song in my humble estimation. So let's talk a little bit more in depth then about I mean, when I was reading up and I saw that this record Dead Man's Pop was coming, obviously the headline that a lot of people led with was this has the sessions with Tom Waits on it. And like I say, I don't think I read an interview with Paul Westerberg where he was brutally honest. He basically said that stuff's unreleased for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
We were by the end of the night, we were extraordinarily drunk. It was embarrassing. We were embarrassed. And although I will give them credit because covering I Can Help, we don't have time to sidebar on this. I think Tom Waits is somewhat overrated. It's possible to overstate his brilliance, in my opinion. But the idea of like, oh my God, the replacements with Tom Waits, hell yeah, I'll listen to that all day. Then when you listen to it, this is like, even by the replacement schmaltz standards, it's a little bit of a stretch as to the artistic merit of the recordings.
Well, because it is drunken, and sloppy and messy, and probably Tommy at that point. I mean, Tommy was hardly an experienced vocalist of any sort at that point, and to be completely drunk off of his ass, it's not really the best way to break in your vocal experience. Those sessions are interesting, but by the way, so those are in L.A. Where the main album was recorded, and I do have a sidebar on those sessions too. So there were a couple of big names floating around the studio at that time, and one was obviously Tom Waits, who they seemed to have an affinity with, and the other was Bob Dylan, who not so much. Like they just ships passing in the night, basically. But at one point, and this somehow didn't get released. It has been released before, originally on an EP called "Don't Buy or Sell It's Crap," which was a promo only thing. They did a cover / parody of Like a Rolling Stone called Like a Rolling Pin, and I think they had recorded it, but were maybe playing it back. And this was when Dylan was around and just kind of going in and out, and I inadvertently he ended up hearing some of that, which I don't think they wanted any part of, but it ended up that he did hear some of their recording of Like a Rolling Pin.
I don't normally associate Bob Dylan with a sense of humor, although he has one for sure, but it's just not I don't know. I don't think he goes around with. He doesn't lead with it, from what I understand.
Yeah, yeah,
He doesn't suffer a lack of self-esteem either, which he's
sure.
Bob Dylan. He doesn't need
Yeah.
to. Boy, that would be a little on the embarrassing side, although they kind of asked for it. No Minnesota love. They didn't. Their paths didn't, or ships didn't pass in the night many, many other times.
Uh, that's really the one I know. I would imagine somewhere along the line their paths crossed. Um, Sidebarring another Dylan related replacement story. Uh, I this isn't a show I attended or anything like that. It's just something I heard about. When the Wallflowers, when Jacob Dylan's band, the Wallflowers, played First Avenue, I think the first time.
Mm-hmm.
He said he was going to do a song by one of Minnesota's favorite songwriters, and so everybody thought that he was going to do a Dylan song, and he ended up covering "Here Comes a Regular."
Wow, that's not bad. I wonder if it was good. Have you ever heard the recording?
No, I haven't.
Interesting. Very interesting. So, I did you so the Tom Waits sessions I thought were they're a curio.
Yeah.
Some of that stuff that's on here has been released before on a previous reissue, I think, of Don't Tell a Soul. I think the first
Yeah,
some of it.
I'm not really like I've had a lot of this stuff before, and I don't necessarily remember where I had it. Um, as far as the Tom Waits sessions go, I think the only thing that had been released of that prior to now was Date to Church ended up on one of those Just Say No
Yeah.
compilations that Warner put out. And I don't remember anything else from the Tom Waits sessions ever coming out. But yeah, there was this promo called "Don't Buy or Sell It's Crap" that had some of this stuff on it. Some of this stuff was on All for Nothing, the double disc greatest hits compilation, greatest hits slash rarities compilation that came out a while back. And then, yeah, some of it came out on the expanded "Don't Tell a Soul." But a lot of this never has come out, and I don't think any. Well, no, I think the only thing from the Bearsville sessions that had ever come out before this was "We Know the Night," which is a great song. That came out on the All for Nothing, Nothing for All, and probably should have made "Don't Tell a Soul" anyway, even though nothing from those sessions actually did.
Portland came out on. There's a version of Portland on here, and there's also a version on that greatest hits compilation. I can't remember. You just mentioned the name of it.
Yeah, All for Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing for All.
All of this and nothing. Yeah. Or sorry. Yeah. All for nothing.
Yeah,
Sorry.
different version of it. Yeah, did come out on that.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, again, does that? I don't know if that fits any particular Replacements album. That's a great song. That is a great song.
I think that could have easily been included on "Don't Tell a Soul." I think they could have made "Don't Tell a Soul" a very solid single disc. I just would have left things off like "We'll Inherit the Earth." I do want to say just to get back in because we're a little bit off the track, but They're Blind. They're Blind is one of those songs that I think most Matt's fans have always hated. I've always thought that was a good song. So you want to talk, just going back to Within Your Reach and Aching to Be, and those types of Westerberg songs that he was a little bit hesitant to actually get into the Replacements set list. I think They're Blind is another really good example of that. Very, very underrated, not popular. Maybe I'm the only person that likes it. I'll accept that. I don't know, but I think it's a good song.
Yeah, the singles were "Aching to Be," I remember, and I know "I'll Be You." Was there any other singles from the record, the original one?
Maybe talent show. I don't know. I'm not so solid on singles.
Interesting. Well, they were a good singles band. You didn't love that? Oh man, those "Pleased to Meet Me" singles were good. That
Yeah,
double
but
finish.
but I don't necessarily because I'm thinking of them as albums. I'm not necessarily consuming them as singles.
Had that show, that concert been around? It didn't seem like it was exceptional, but it has some moments where they hit a they hit a groove here and there. I mean, I don't know if they
Yeah,
would say it's the greatest show, but there are moments where you can absolutely hear it.
yeah, and it's funny. Oh, well, and to answer your question, it was an EP that I don't remember the title of. It might have actually been a college promo. Um, I think maybe five of those songs were released on that. Four or five of those songs were released on that, and yeah, I don't quite remember which one. I'm pretty sure Talent Show was one of those. And yeah, it's funny because a few years ago when they were reunited, a couple of friends and I decided to get tickets for the two Chicago shows that they did, and then also get one for Milwaukee. We got the Milwaukee ones when we weren't sure if the Chicago ones were going to be available to us because it was one of those you have to get in like right under the gun to get the tickets. But we ended up seeing all of the shows. The first show in Chicago was half great, but also partially just a train wreck. And then the next night was just the train derailed almost from the get go, and it was it it never got on track. Um, and then 2 nights after that was the Milwaukee show, and it is one of the greatest shows I ever saw. So maybe there's some kind of Milwaukee magic for the Mats. I don't know.
That tour, the tour that this album comes from, the Don't Tell a Soul tour, they played two Iowa shows. I realize that's not fascinating for everybody, but like they played two Iowa shows in towns like a 90-minute drive from each other. They did Davenport, and I distinctly remember the Cedar Rapids show. I went down to the Paramount Theater. This is another one of those instances in my life where I looked at other music nerds doing the thing that I was doing, and I felt overwhelming shame and walked and walked away. There were people
Oh,
sitting outside the Paramount Theater at the door of the bus, like sitting there waiting for them to come off the bus. And it made me realize, like, God, being a rock star can't be all great. I just very distinctly remember just these other music nerds, and then realize like I'm here too, and realize like, oh my God, Paul Westerberg deals with this everywhere he goes. But yeah, you didn't get to see either of those shows, Davenport or Cedar Rapids in '89, summer '89.
no, I was a little bit too young at that time, really.
Yeah. I was shocked they played the Paramount Theater. That's such a big venue. I don't think it's sold out. But I went on setlist.com or setlist.fm looking to see, and neither the Davenport or Cedar Rapids show have their set lists. But I was looking at the set lists around there, like, isn't one of the big deals about this the Dead Man's Pop is that it has the cover of Another Girl, Another Planet, does it not?
Well, they didn't record that in the studio. They just that was just always a live song that they did.
But it's on this disc. It's in the live disc of this
Yeah,
reissue.
yeah.
They also were on this tour. We're doing Soft Boys, I Want to Destroy You. The day they decide to release that, I will be first in line. I would definitely like to hear the Replacements do I Want to Destroy You.
Well, I have recordings of that. I
Hmm.
mean, yeah, covers. If we're gonna sidebar on replacements doing covers, we don't have enough time for that, really.
That could be its own. That definitely could
Yeah,
be its own. So give
but
me an overall. I'm sorry, go ahead.
but cover. You know that they did record in the studio here. Goodbye to Jane by Slade is one of the ones that actually made it. Not many of those made it into the studio. There were a lot in the Pleased to Meet Me sessions, and then then for Let It Be, they covered a few. I don't remember them all, but there was Temptation Eyes and Black Diamond, and Kiss's Black Diamond ended up making it onto the album because it was like the least likely choice, and so therefore it made the album.
Wow. Do you know if there's going to be any more of these records for, or is there enough archival material, hopefully, for like a Tim to maybe get a treatment like this? Is there anything left replacements wise?
I don't know. For this one, the big thing was they had the sessions that were scrapped, and so that's why you can have a box set. I mean, and also this is, I guess you could have anything be expanded, and then if you have 2 discs worth of live material, which you probably would, you could do this sort of treatment, but I don't think you're going to have as much studio stuff to pick from as you have here because of the scrapped Bearsville sessions.
Yeah.
Well, and so to go into the Bearsville sessions a little bit. So I don't know if you know anything about that studio at all.
I've driven by it. It's just up the thruway from New York City. It's Todd Rundgren's studio, is it not?
I'm not sure who. Well, I guess actually I do. Jack Grossman actually I think started the studio.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, yeah, it's the idea of the studio is to be secluded. It's upstate New York. It's 2 hours away from the city. That didn't work out so well for the replacements because they got bored. And Slim Dunlap was in, I think, a car accident prior to that, and so he was prescribed with painkillers, which they passed around. And so the combination of boredom and painkillers and alcohol just kind of made the whole thing a mess. And interestingly enough, Metallica was also there recording "And Justice for All" at the same time.
Oh my!
And very mild-mannered by comparison.
Interesting.
Yeah. So those sessions partially got scrapped because of those problems that they were dealing with an inexperienced producer, and he wasn't really in any kind of position of authority to tone them down at all. But there are some good things that came out of these sessions. And again, like what is on this set doesn't really change my opinion of whether or not I like the song. But I will say if this version of "We'll Inherit the Earth" was the one that made it onto "Don't Tell a Soul," I'd feel a bit different about it because it is a lot more rough and spirited and has a lot more attitude to it.
Well, I can't go song for song for you on it. I don't love "Don't Tell a Soul." I think probably for different reasons than the average Matt's fan. I think there are other. I think again for me, I think I agree with you that like Tim, "Let It Be," "Pleased to Meet Me" for sure are their pinnacle. I think you like there's enough on Hootenanny that I totally get it why you include that. This really is it is a step down in quality, I think, but listening to between this package, Dead Man's Pop, and all the other versions of the record out there, you're right. I think I could easily put together a 10-song version of it that's pretty tight and right.
Yeah, and I think if you don't Tell a Soul and you have any inkling of getting this set, I know it's a big investment, but then again, you can also listen to it on Spotify too, so it's really not much of an investment. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. I don't know how music is consumed. I guess I'm not in touch with that. But so anyway, if you're starting with "Don't Tell a Soul," I think this is a good place to start. I would start here before you go to or I would start with Dead Man's Pop before you go to Don't Tell a Soul. However, if you're just starting with the replacements, do not start with either of these. Start with Let It Be, Tim, and Pleased to Meet Me.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad for you. You are a Mats fan. Here's some archival stuff. It sounds like you're going to get more than your fair share of enjoyment out of it. I certainly will squeeze a few ads to the playlists from it. So, I mean, overall, I would recommend, like you do, Spotify's the way to go. Make yourself a nice era playlist, and there's plenty here to work with. Has fall fallen in Iowa? We had like I think yesterday or yeah. So we're here in the starting the second week of October. We still have 80-degree weather here in New York, but today was the first day where I had that feeling of fall. So I didn't get a chance to road test fall songs quite like I might have hoped, but I think I've got the category down. I think you don't need to experience fall weather to know the fall song. So I'm ready to go if you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready. And by the way, a couple of things. I'll sidebar on your weather sidebar.
Yes.
Because it is starting to get cold here. I will be in Minnesota this weekend, and there is snow expected. So
Wow.
we're just we're just moving right along into it. Another thing, I think I want to call this autumnal anthems.
Mm. I will defer.
Okay, so part one of
Part one.
autumnal anthems.
Autumnal anthems. That's a thing of beauty. Well, I believe that the beauty of that name gives you the right to go first.
Okay, well, and worthy of the name, and I'm just going to preface this with my list. For the most part, these aren't songs that mention fall. They aren't necessarily songs that were intended to be fall songs or anything at all of that sort. For the most part, the thing that links these songs for me is probably just the acoustic guitar. Just acoustic guitar driven songs I think really fit it, like when you're scoring a film. Not, not that you do this often, not that you score films often. um, if you were to score a film, you would want to use instruments that fit the scene that you're scoring. And I just think there's something about the acoustic guitar acoustic guitar driven songs that just work with falling leaves, colder weather, getting darker early, and that sort of thing. So that's where I'm going with mine. Although the first song is very much an exception to that. It is the Kinks' Autumn Almanac, which really is kind of just an outline for what you do in the fall. Yeah, I mean it's just kind of a list, a guidebook. It's an autumn almanac. Football on a Saturday, roast beef on Sunday. Leaves of a musty colored yellow, sweeping the leaves and that sort of thing. And it just is a guidebook, and that's my first choice.
That is from the album. Which album is that from?
I think it's a single, actually. I think it's an A side only. That I don't know. I might have to do more. I mean, I know it is an A side, but I think that's all it was. I don't think it was an album track.
All right. Yeah, Kinks. That period. So it's on Spotify on the deluxe edition of Something Else, which is
Okay.
the David Watts era.
And is it a deluxe song? Is it an extra track, or is it actually on the album?
No, it's not on the album. It's like the last song on the album that isn't just a redo or a remix or a mono, or it's basically the last original song in the expanded area. So
Okay, so yeah, I think A side only for that one.
there is a BBC version of it though on
Mm-hmm.
this package. So from 1967. So grab that too. Interesting call. I would have never called that one, but I love Kinks of that vintage. There's no way I won't dig it. I have to say, I realize your first pick is somewhat on the nose, but you're generally not going on the nose with this stuff.
Yeah.
I probably skew a little more on the nose than you will. I'm going to go first with the Smiths' Headmaster Ritual from Meat is Murder, about school, about belligerent ghouls run Manchester schools. To me, fall has never been a season that I've loved all that much. I love summer, and fall is the death of summer. And so, Smith singing a song about how miserable school is, to me, would be a first day of school little ditty. I think Tom York does a cover of it too. I'll have to dig that up. But this Morrissey isn't aging particularly well, but the Smiths are, and a lot of a lot of people sort of love the singles from the Smiths, but Meat is Murder was a pretty complete statement as an album, and this kicks that album off, which is that's a pretty heavy duty slot for them, kicking off their second album. So it comes big. It's instantly identifiable as the Smiths. It doesn't. You're right, I think, Sean, about Sir Flick. Sorry, about you are right about the acoustic, organic stuff being really well suited to fall. This really doesn't do that. It's more abrasive than purely organic, and I think that's because of the subject matter. I mean, I didn't love school. If I was 15, when I was 15, 16 years old, and these records came out, I was so happy to hear someone else considered school hell. So I look back on it with fondness. I don't look back on school with fondness. So I'm going to start the Smiths' Headmaster Ritual from it's the kickoff track from Meat is Murder.
Yeah, well, and back to school is something that I think will come up on my list, if not in part one, certainly in part two, but we'll see.
Done.
So yeah, there are certain thematic things that are unavoidable. Okay, the next song is I think surprising. I'm sure it'll be surprising to you. It's kind of surprising to me, but it's perfect, and also it allows me to make a connection between the first song on my list too, and it is Pink Floyd's "Fearless." And the connection isn't just the acoustic guitars, although those are there. It's a great David Gilmour song with him playing what I believe is probably a 12-string. But the connection I'm making here is football. So Ray Davis on Autumn Almanac talks about football on Saturday. Of course, in this country, we think of it as either, well, on a Saturday, it would be college football. But he's talking, of course, about footy, or what we commonly call soccer here. And the connection here is that in the background on the Pink Floyd song is the cop from Anfield in Liverpool singing "You'll Never Walk Alone." And so the connection between the two songs is football, and of course I'm a Liverpool supporter, as I've mentioned I think before. So of course it that drives it home for me.
Wow, good choice. I totally get it. Fearless is in my all-time Pink Floyd top. It's probably my favorite Pink Floyd song. The only real competition maybe for me is "Wish You Were Here," but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of think this might be the best. It probably is my favorite Pink Floyd song, and I should also mention, it plays a part in an interesting scene in the Richard Linklater movie "Everybody Wants Some" as well.
Yeah, I love that. I have to recommend Mary Lou Lord does a cover of it on her album Baby Blue. I'll put that on one of our playlists too. But who can I actually think, and again, I'm not just ragging on Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd, Metal is the first great Pink Floyd song, or first great Pink Floyd album. Fearless is probably their first truly great timeless song. I like One of These Days, and I like Echoes too. I even like the Fluff in Between. I think Metal is actually a pretty good record. And then after to go from Metal to Dark Side of the Moon to Wish You Were Here, you're gonna have a very hard time catching a band being able to pull those three off in a row. That's pretty intense. I mean, if you compare those three to their like first three albums, just night and day, and the first like classic Pink Floyd sounding song, I think is probably Fearless. It's great, but look up Mary Lou Lord if you can.
Yeah, I definitely will. And yeah, I mean, I'm not the biggest Pink Floyd fan in the world, but if they had more songs like this, I'm sure I would be.
Good choice, sir. I, for my second choice, am going to. Originally, when I tried to do this list, I could not stop coming up with songs referring to like sadness. I'm Swedish. Everybody in my family has seasonal affective disorder in one way or another, and I had it pretty bad when I was young. So I absolutely just the days getting shorter and the weather getting colder. I'm going to pick a song that encapsulates the seasonal affective disorder topic for me, and then I'm going to try not to come back to it if I can. I Often Dream of Trains by Robin Hitchcock has this fantastic lyric. I often dream of trains till it gets light. The summer turns to winter overnight. The leaves fall so suddenly. The sun sets at 4 o'clock. It's exactly what I'm dreading. So for me, like in one little verse, just explaining like, oh shit, the sun's going down at 5 o'clock. I'm gonna wake up in the dark and I'm gonna come home in the dark. That just feeling of dread of all that starting again. That's fall to me. And it's just really dreadful. And I've never heard anybody sing about it better than Robin Hitchcock. I Often Dream of Trains.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting that we go there because that's kind of where I'm going to. Although I would say sun going down at 5 o'clock is probably more when you're in winter.
True.
But anyway, it's kind of along the lines where I'm going with this because I am kind of I'm building somewhat of a narrative here. Okay, so we started off with the Kinks talking about football on a Saturday, and then we go to Pink Floyd with audio from the Cop at Anfield on a Saturday. Well, presumably on a Saturday. Football is also played on a Sunday. These days, it's also played on Mondays or even Fridays, and it could be just about any day of the week. But most commonly, most games are going to be played on Saturdays. So from there, I'm going to go with Nick Drake and Saturday Sun. I think Nick Drake, just about any Nick Drake song sounds like a fall song to me. And this is particularly this is definitely one of my top five Nick Drake songs for sure, and it kind of builds my time map here.
Interesting.
So, yeah. So and really, it's a song that personally, I always think of this song really watching the sun go down, not so much when the sun's high in the sky. So this is kind of my late afternoon Saturday autumn song.
Well played, sir. When spring comes, I'm going to choose Brighter Later. Just want you to know that now.
Yeah, that's actually that would have been a possibility. Fly was also a strong contender to make my list.
Pink Moon, I know, is sort of the most commonly known song of his, but people think it's great because it's great. It's
yeah,
just,
yeah. And if we're doing Harvest Moon songs, that would be perfect for that too.
Yeah, I'm now. Is Saturday Sun is originally on the album Five Leaves Left?
Yeah, I have to go back and remember. Like at this point, I just put songs on playlists.
Well, I'm saying if it's named Five Leaves Left, that's you can't get much more autumnal than that.
Right, exactly.
All right, This is like This is like all sidebar. My next choice, and it's a little bit on the nose, kind of. And it's a late ad. I just called an audible earlier today and threw it on. And I'm going to go with Lily, Rosemary, and the Jack of Hearts by Bob Dylan. I'm fine with using the version on Blood on the Tracks, but there is like a slower, longer acoustic version that finally came out on the More Blood, More Tracks playlist. That acoustic version, while it's almost 10 effing minutes long, is a great 10 minutes long. And I don't have a firm opinion here. I'm a Bob Dylan fan. In my eyes, he basically can do no wrong. I consider almost everything he's done worth talking about. And so to me, there's just one little turn of phrase in this song that has driven me nuts since I first heard it. And that is the lyric is, the festival was over and the boys were all planning for a fall. And I do not know why that bothers me. Maybe this is a place to discuss it and vent my feelings and get feedback. I could just be wrong, but what is he doing there? Like, is he trying to do like wordplay where there is none? Is he trying to say that like the boys were all the festival was over and the boys were all planning for a fall? I guess I would ask, is that an autumn reference or not? What is that?
I'm not sure, and I don't necessarily want to sidebar, but yeah, Dylan is another one that Dylan will make my part two list. I will guarantee you that. There are a lot of songs to choose from with Dylan for this type of list.
I assume that the story basically takes place in late summer, early fall. And that acoustic version, I'm just going to riff off of your earlier idea, which is correct. Like that acoustic version that came out on the box set, definitely for me. The song takes place in a theater, winter time and fall, winter. That's when you're back in school and you see the kids' plays, and that being indoorsy, the indoor life sort of starts. And I think of that song as being about that exclusively indoor life that I associate with fall, leaving the outdoors and having everything sort of take place within walls. So whether or not my little lyrical dalliance is a thing or not, I still want to put it on my list. Lily, Rosemary, Jack of Hearts, Bob Dylan.
Yeah, good choice. Yeah, like I said, I'll definitely have some Dylan. Almost did on this list. Very hard to decide which one to go with. But I think on part two, I'm going to have something. So I'm doing a little research here. Yeah, Saturday Sun is the last track on Five Leaves Left. And as I was researching that, I discovered that on the first track on that album, Richard Thompson played electric guitar on Time Has Told Me.
Interesting.
Yeah. So just a little trivia. Okay, so my next choice. So I don't really have another Saturday song, although that would have been great. If I would have gone in thinking of making that much of a tight theme here, I would have come up with another Saturday song, I think. So I'm just going to turn to Monday. And we had talked earlier about back to school. And so R.E.M. makes my list because I think a lot of their songs are suited for what I'm going for with acoustic guitar driven songs. But also they're kind of the quintessential college rock band. And so to me, on that level, they kind of work with this back to school theme. And my fourth song is Talk About the Passion.
Mm. That, sir, that is very well received on this end. Boy, even the cover of Murmur it's just got, it looks like late fall. It's such an organic, that is good call all the way down.
And it's interesting too, because I think their music works so well with this time of year, but then again, they're from Georgia, where the seasons aren't necessarily corresponding with what they are in the northern part of the country.
Yeah. That era of REM, again, this is the second time we've talked about it, though, is we have to do an IRS versus Warner Brothers comparison, just because you just look at how this is like 1983 and they have an album. They're kids still, and they write Radio Free Europe, talk about the passion. I mean, that is so good. The album is good all the way, pretty much end to end. Good,
Yeah.
very well played, sir. REM, talk about the passion. I'm going to go next with. I admit this is really on the nose, and I admit I can prove that I listen to this song normally anyway. Like I'm not just pulling this out as cheese for an autumn playlist. But "Harvest for the World" by the Isley Brothers. It's probably a little bit on the nose, but it's great, and I think people like Isley Brothers. I think people underestimate. They basically were able to get songs on the charts from in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and I think even into the 90s with R. Kelly. Like it's a pretty amazing career, and over the span of their career, they have a huge variety of stuff. They did lots of great covers. They did really great like urban, really heavy funk. But they also did a lot of stuff that really is identifiable as its sort of early 70s granola type thing, and it's sort of like a acoustic hippie anthem. Harvest for the World, it's on an album I think that's also called Harvest for the World. Now there's a sidebar here, which is that a version of Harvest for the World, it was also done by the Power Station, which is the super group involving Robert Palmer, the two of the Taylors from Duran Duran, and the drummer from Chic, Tony. Crap, how could I not remember his name? His drumming on that record is fantastic, and it's a. I know, Flick. You do not believe in guilty pleasures. Maybe it's just a cheap heuristic that I'm too easy. I fall for too easily. But that Power Station record is sort of a guilty pleasure. You have to admit, Robert Palmer, he covered like Husker Du too. Like he was not
Yeah.
just.
I was about to mention that, and
Yeah.
by the way, we should say that the way I feel about guilty pleasures is that if you like them, you shouldn't necessarily feel guilty about it. There's probably a reason. And anyway, that's the way I feel about what I like. Like if I like something, I usually know why I like it, and I just don't feel guilty about it. It might not be. I guarantee you, there are plenty of non-cool things that I like, but I don't feel guilty about it.
All right. Well, then I'm
That's
not going to
really
feel
that's
guilty.
my
I'm not
stance.
going to feel guilt. I'm not going to feel guilty. I would say that the Power Station version of Harvest for the World is also very tolerable. So there you have it. Harvest for the World. Focus on the Isley Brothers version. It's your thing. It's not Live It Up. It's not money, 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 money. It's a crunchy little piece of soul. It's very strange, but a beautiful record. Harvest for the World by the Isley Brothers and by the Power Station.
Yeah, and the Robert Palmer version of New Day Rising by Husker Du is probably a discussion for another time. But but
Of
just
course it is.
consider the fact though that he did that live, and the average audience member of a Robert Palmer concert
Right.
could not possibly have any idea of what he's covering.
But you have
It's
to
just
give
kind
it.
of funny to think about.
I mean, the Addicted to Love video is bad news. Certainly, history is not going to judge that kindly. But if he gets up, like, there's a bunch of people there expecting to hear "Doctor, Doctor, give me the news. I got a bad case of loving you," and they get New Day Rising instead. So I'm
Yeah.
going to give him some love here and just say, big
Yeah.
wherever you are, Robert Palmer, shout out.
Yeah, big shout out for that. But yeah, it's I really don't think he converted anybody by doing it, but I'm glad he did it.
Yeah, big ups, big ups.